And what's up? Welcome in GC Live. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, Thursday episode of the show. Got a great show lined up for you here today. Of course, as we try to do every single week, we try to get you somebody on from basically a media member or sometimes even the head coach from South Carolina's upcoming opponent. We've managed to do that again this week. Not Josh Heupel, but we will have Austin Price from Volquest.com who will be joining us actually here in about 9 minutes. So Austin has been on the show, I guess, once or twice, maybe. I know we had him on last year leading into the game, and Austin has been kind enough to join us here today as well. So Austin will be on. He'll talk some ball and tell us a little bit about the Volunteers. As always, this show is brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond, and by request from everyone, we have an updated picture of Clint looking excellent in what has got to be a BP Skinner suit. I'm only going to assume, of course, best suits in Columbia. Clint Hammond, of course, you're a branch manager of the Columbia Mortgage Network. 71597 is the NMLS number. C Hammond, that's the letter C, Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com is his email address, and 803-576-4450 is the phone number. As always, Clint is our presenting sponsor, and if you're in the market for a new home or maybe you just want to refinance, give Clint a shout, 803-771-6933. What's up to everybody already in the chat? Hope y'all are doing well. See our usual suspects already hanging out, checking in on everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Craig pointing out that Hendon Hooker is 5th nationally in passing efficiency, has done a really good job for them. And we're going to talk to Austin, obviously, about him and several aspects of their, their roster, their squad, however you want to say it. But, Hendon Hooker, this is a situation where he was not their starter. Actually, Joe Milton, transfer from Michigan, someone Chris and I are very familiar with. South Carolina recruited him a bit out of high school. Big kid, big armed kid. He was their initial starter. He's a transfer. Hooker is a transfer from Virginia Tech. I always thought watching Hooker at VT that there was something there, like that he was had solid ability if he could put it all together. And, in this new scheme that Tennessee's obviously running under a completely new coaching staff, they've been pretty run heavy. But I tell you, man, the thing, if I'm South Carolina, I am most worried about his ability in the run game and what that adds to the mix for Tennessee. It's not just that obviously they have some solid backs, including, of course, our old buddy Tyon Evans from Hartsville. But the QB run game, if I'm a defensive coordinator, to me, that would always be what would sort of scare me going into a matchup. And in this case, Hooker rushed for, I think, 80 yards last week, 15 carries. He's a big part of what they do on offense.
He is, and it's something that the coaching staff has mentioned. Clayton White, during his media appearance earlier this week, very cognizant of that fact. And man, the reality is it makes it so much tougher as a defensive coordinator and as a defense, really, as a player, to be asked to slow down all these different elements of a given offense. And then, oh, by the way, now you have to worry about a mobile quarterback too, right? A guy that can pass it. The system makes it difficult, to defend the pass because they'll spread you out. They'll take deep shots, right, with Josh Heupel's system. But they've also run the ball. I mean, we've mentioned several times, broken record alert this week, Tennessee actually running the ball at a higher rate in terms of attempts than anybody in the league. And so Evans is a big part of that, but Hooker is too. And so South Carolina, I think, Wes, this is a potential problem area for them because we've seen them struggle and have kind of some negative signs against the run. And really, you get back at the Troy game, you look at the tape of that. There were some struggles at linebacker. There were some struggles in the back end with taking bad angles, missing some tackles, some guys bouncing out of some gaps. Tennessee's going to have the talent on the offensive line and at running back to make that happen. Then you also have to account for Hooker. And then you may think, okay, you get him into third down. Maybe you got a 3rd and 6. a lot of teams, you feel pretty good about the matchup because you've got your pass rushers and you feel like you can go get a stop. Hooker can escape, and make you pay and get some first downs. Obviously, he can do some design run stuff. So it makes it harder to key on the other skill position players that are on the field. The other five guys of whatever combination that they are on the field. Now you have to account for a sixth, and that makes it tough.
Yeah, so we'll, as I said, we'll be talking to Austin Price about pretty much. There's a lot of things for us to hit on here, man. Just from big picture, new coaching staff to this game in particular, to Tennessee's progress this year. What can you expect from them offensively? What can you expect from them defensively? By the way, do you have an invite out to him? I did not have his email address on.
Austin should have his official invite to GC Live right in his inbox.
Official GC Live invite has been delivered, so we'll be joined by him hopefully in about 4 minutes. Austin, I don't know, man. Not willing to go on camera with us. I guess we'll have to go the route of on the phone, but still, we appreciate him for his time. Obviously, always busy this time of year, so we appreciate that, and looking forward to getting some insight from him about everything going on in the Tennessee football program. While we're waiting on him, Chris, let's talk a little bit of recruiting, man. I'm very curious about this new rule that's going into effect, and we're sort of still gathering it. Chris, it seems like even the people that are going to be directly affected by the rule don't necessarily know exactly how it's going to be implemented yet. This rule, for those who have not seen it, is that, and the NCAA had to do this, y'all. This had to take place, honestly, from a roster management standpoint. But if if a school, South Carolina, for example, has 5 transfers out, it used to be like the current iteration of the rules was that didn't matter. You could still only sign 25 players per class. And that's what you call initial counters. That's the phrasing that is used. And so it didn't matter how many guys you lost. You had 25 initial counters. And then the old school way of thinking, and it used to be you could actually do some little different creative things to oversign guys that enrolled. When Spurrier was here, guys that enrolled early did not count as one of the 25 initial counters. You could count them back. And there were some different ways to do things. They closed all the loopholes, and it became 25 is pretty much 25. Well, the thing now, guys, is that you have so many people transferring out that, even taking 25, 25, 25, 25, and then 25 with a fifth class, because you'd assume there's some red shirts in there, that you'd add up to 85. Well, kids aren't redshirting as much as they once were. Even with the 4-game thing, it seems like kids just go play more. But the big thing is the transfer portal, and losing so many guys to transfer portal, you are not able to replace them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in today's show, about how that is going to affect South Carolina and affect college football in general. But first of all, I see him joining us right now. We're going to try to bring him in. Let's go out to our phone lines. It is Austin Price of Volquest.com. Austin, appreciate you joining us, man. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can, guys. How are you?
We are great, man. Again, appreciate you as always. I know you joined us last year going into that season opener, South Carolina versus Tennessee. Luckily, that seems like it was decades ago with everything that's happened since then. But how are things going in Knoxville, man? What's the general feel around the Volquest message boards right now about the state of the Tennessee program with a new staff and sort of kicking an SEC team in the teeth last week?
Well, it's amazing, what a good thumping on your side of the ledger will do for you. A couple of weeks ago, Tennessee fans are, upset they gave the Pittsburgh game away, or they felt like they gave the Pittsburgh game away. And then, of course, Tennessee's always struggled with Florida. So no one got really been out of shape about that. But, to go out last week and beat to beat Missouri the way they did, was a pleasant surprise for a lot of Vol fans, and they're really excited about it. I mean, they're excited heading into this weekend. They feel good about the matchup with South Carolina. And so, I think this game's just going to boil down to, who can kind of impose their will. Can South Carolina keep it a low-scoring game? If they do, South Carolina has shown they can win those type of games. Tennessee wants to get it into a score fest and put up a lot of points. So that's something South Carolina's not, done too well this year, is put up a lot of points. So, who can kind of impose their will heading into this game?
Well, Austin, thanks again. Chris here. Appreciate you joining us, man. So you mentioned lots of points. I want to go back to that phrase. Wes mentioned the Missouri game earlier. I want to back up to that because I think it's relevant to, what we may see this week. Not that I don't know if any of us are anticipating 60-something Tennessee points. Again, I don't know if you're anticipating that, but was there any reason to think that was coming? I mean, we know that this Josh Heupel offense, based on what he's done in the past at other stops, and based on what Tennessee's shown this season, they've shown the ability to put up some points. But did you see 400-something rushing yards and being up so much at halftime? It was kind of an offensive explosion. Did it sort of come out of nowhere last week?
Yeah, I think getting 60, it's only the 5th time in program history against an SEC foe. So, yeah, not only anybody expected that, but did they expect them to score points against what's a very, very mediocre to below mediocre Missouri defense? Sure. I think a lot of Vol fans thought they would score in the 30s and 40s. To put up 45 in the first half and really kind of coasted in the second half in a lot of ways. They were just, more or less trying to get that one to triple zeros at the end. I don't think anybody expected them to put up 62 points. And again, it's only happened 5 times against an SEC foe in Tennessee's history. 2 of the 5 have been against Missouri in the last, half a dozen years.
Awesome. So, obviously, as you said, new scheme. I'm sure guys are getting more comfortable. Guys are sort of kind of finding their way and what's being asked of them. Obviously, Hendon Hooker doesn't win the job to start out. He takes advantage of an injury situation there with Joe Milton. But, I thought really has played well. And I saw that Josh Heupel complimented, his ability to just sort of be efficient and not make bad plays and not turn the football over. But also, I think if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm concerned about the fact that this guy has become a major factor in the run game as well. I think he rushed for 80 yards last week. What have you seen out of Hooker so far as just him getting comfortable in this scheme and how they've been able to use him?
Well, I always thought that Hendon was hampered in the quarterback battle, Wes, because you can't display in a no-contact jersey some of the traits he has as a runner. Mm-hmm. And those quarterbacks, they're uber sensitive to them. So, like, anytime anybody gets within a couple of feet of them, it's, blow it dead and spot the ball and to the next play. So, I always felt like he was somewhat hampered because part of his game is much like Josh Dobbs when he was here, is the ability to create and, avoid and elude defenders. And, you can't do that in practice. So, I think that, once they've got into the season, they've kind of, found that, hey, he's the best option. Alex Golish said, the offense coordinator said earlier this week, they were surprised that, his running ability, because they hadn't seen that in practice. Well, yeah, he's not allowed to do it in practice. And did you not watch his tape at Virginia Tech? He that's what he does well. And so he honestly, I think, throws it, pretty solid. Is he perfect? No, but for what they asked, he throws all the throws that, they want. And so, Hendon Hooker started to settle in. He's not turned the ball over the last couple of games, and that's been a nice surprise as you head into SEC play. And I think that's the biggest thing for South Carolina this weekend is, can they get Hendon Hooker to turn the football over? He was turnover prone the first couple of games. I think he was even maybe a little turnover prone in fall camp. Can they get him to turn the ball over? Because if he doesn't, then Tennessee's offense honestly clicks pretty well. If he does, then things switch around.
Yeah, it's a great point, Austin. I think the last 100-something attempts for Tennessee, 1 interception for their quarterbacks, and the Gamecocks have picked up in around that same span 9 interceptions. So something definitely got to give there. Staying with the offense, Austin, there's a lot of positive talk about this fall's offense, deservedly so, based on what they've done. Are there any weak links in this Vols offense? Something that something or some things that they maybe have been some problem areas or that they've not done so well so far?
Well, I think depth along the offensive line, Chris, is something that I look at. And then, I just think overall at receiver, I mean, I think they've been a little bit underwhelming there. They've had some drops. At times they've, just, I thought, played a little bit poorly. They've been better the last couple of games. The rotation has gotten smaller the last couple of games. You're not seeing as many receivers on the field as you did the first 3 games. So maybe that's the direction they're going. They're going to limit the rotation. They've moved Velus Jones exclusively to the slot, and he seems to be really thriving there. Javonte Payton scored a touchdown in 3 consecutive games, and he seems to be thriving. But I would just go on the whole. The receivers have been a bit disappointing through a total of 5 games, and then I think lack of depth on the offensive line is something that Tennessee fans are really worried about.
Austin, so the Gamecock fans listening may throw their phone when they hear me ask this, but there's some guys on this roster that Gamecock fans are pretty familiar with. Tyon Evans, I know had a big week last week, sort of busting out against Missouri. Hartsville kid. Obviously, Jalen Hyatt from about 30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, right down the road at Dutch Fork. What can you tell us about those guys and sort of how Tyon Evans has sort of been settling in at running back?
Those two seems like they're going in 2 totally different directions. Jalen Hyatt, his reps have went down. He had a couple of drops there early in the year and just seems to have kind of been in a funk a little bit. Did not play many snaps last week. We'll see if he gets more run this week against South Carolina. If there's anybody in the stadium motivated this week, it's probably Tyon Evans. You just anytime you go against your home state school when you go out of state, you get a little motivated. And I think a lot of kids, and some are jilted and they get motivated by that. Some are not. South Carolina wanted Tyon. It's just one of those things where, he'll probably push it in his mind that he was slighted or something. I mean, like to motivate. So Tyon's really playing well. He is having a really, really good year. And you will see him become more of a focal point of the offense going forward. He was splitting a lot of carries with Jabari Small these first 5 weeks, but Jabari's been banged up with a shoulder injury. He got re-injured last week. Not sure he'll be able to go on Saturday, and if he can't, then most of the load will go to number 8 in black.
So let's go to the defensive side of the ball now, Austin. And I think probably coming into this year, correct me if I'm wrong, this is maybe viewed as the weaker link on this Vols defense relative to the offense. What have been your assessments of the Vols defense so far? The good, the bad, everything in between.
Well, to me, the pleasant surprise has been Tim Banks as defensive coordinator. I mean, no one knew what they were getting with Coach Banks when he came here from Penn State. He had been the defensive coordinator at Illinois. It was not a very successful run, but not a lot of people have had success at Illinois over the years. And so, I think that, kind of a lot of question marks going in. He did surround himself with some veteran coaches. Rodney Garner is getting unbelievable play out of a defensive line that has not been very good. He's just kind of changed the culture in that room. He's flipped the room in a lot of ways. Certain people are gone, new additions here and there out of the transfer portal. Brian Jean-Marie has done a nice job with what was a depleted linebacking group after the departures of Quavaris Crouch and Henry Toto. And in the secondary, Willie Martinez is doing a nice job. And then when you throw in Mike Eckler coaching outside backers, you just got a lot of experience on the defensive side of the ball for Tennessee. And so they've got them playing much better than I would have ever imagined. Although before the season, I thought Tennessee's offense, and I said this a number of different places, I thought Tennessee's offense would not be quite as good as everybody was expecting. I think people were just putting this like unrealistic expectations on it. But I also said I thought Tennessee's defense would be better than what everybody was thinking, because everybody's thought process was the spring game, which was, the 3 of us were playing linebacker for the Vols in the spring. And, that's not the case now. And so, they've gotten really solid play out of the overall defense. It's a workman-like group, nothing spectacular, but I don't think they're really poor in any area either.
Yeah, and I was going to go there. Sort of, what is maybe the identity of this defense, Austin, as far as what you've seen, or are they more? Is it an aggressive group? Is it more of like a sit back and kind of make the opponent go 15 plays down the field? What have you sort of seen them at, with a new staff on that side of the ball? What is the style of play, I guess I should say, on the defensive side of the ball? And are there a couple of guys that have just maybe played above their heads, or they've played better than you thought, that you think are maybe worth mentioning through 5 games?
Well, it feels like that they are an aggressive type of defense in between the 20s. Tennessee gets a little more conservative when when a school drives the field on them, and of course there's a lot less ground to cover inside the 20, so they don't have to be as aggressive trying to force a turnover. They can kind of set back and see if they can keep the ball in front of them. But they're an aggressive. They're going to bring pressure. They bring pressure from every level. And then as far as players that have stood out, Tyler Barron's had his moments, although he's been a bit, nicked up. He's not 100%. Theo Jackson has played really well through 5 weeks. He's one of the older statesmen on the defensive side of the ball. Matthew Butler had a really strong start to the year for Tennessee, the defensive lineman from North Carolina. So, Tennessee, again, nothing, like there's just not a superstar, but they have a lot of solid players on the defense that have honestly, I think, been playing a bit over their heads all year that have kind of helped, give Tennessee a serviceable defense when most people thought coming into the year, oh, they're going to get run through, it's going to be pitiful, and they've been anything but.
Yeah, there's some similarities to the South Carolina defense, a parallel there, Austin, with they've got some guys playing above their heads too. I think it's particularly in the secondary. It's the same kind of deal. Before we dive into the last couple game things on this upcoming game to kind of close the book in our preview with you, to back up to a different area, what is the latest and kind of the state of the program with Tennessee's recruiting efforts? I know that was a kind of a significant storyline in the changeover from Jeremy Pruitt to Josh Heupel. What have you seen on the recruiting trail from the Vols so far?
Well, they've actually got what seems to be a normal recruiting weekend coming up this weekend, which is a nice, pleasant surprise, because I feel like they've had no juice in recruiting the last couple of months. It's just felt like stagnant, Groundhog Day, same old, same old. And, I guess Tennessee finally decided, okay, we're going to, even though it's another noon game, we're going to go all out to try to get kids here. And so, the list that they have coming in this weekend, if they can get 75% of them, they'll have a great weekend. So, these noon games have certainly not helped. And then, again, a lot of schools have used the ongoing investigation against Tennessee because they can. And I don't blame them. If I was Tennessee and a school you were recruiting against had the same thing going on, I'd use it too. I mean, it's just smart recruiting. And so Tennessee can't definitively say, hey, we know what we're going to get. It's not going to be that bad, and so when, schools tell these prospects, it's going to be 3-year probation, 4-year probation, bowl ban, all this stuff. Tennessee can't definitively say they're not right, but they can't, one way or the other. So just provides a lot of doubt. So that's, to me, what's kind of hampered, recruiting in certain ways. And then, they got here late. I mean, you factor in, when was Beamer hired?
Well, he was actually hired the final day of the regular season last year.
So November.
South Carolina gets Kentucky.
so November.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Whereas Josh Heupel was hired literally basically around the 1st of February. And then his whole staff wasn't here until almost the end of February. So, like, you're talking about 3 months. I mean, like, a lot of those kids were starting to come off the board, that Tennessee was trying to recruit, at least early on. And so, I think they're going to take a swing at some of these kids that have committed elsewhere and see if they can get them to come take a look and get to know them and that type of thing. I think that'd be smart recruiting if they did. And so I think they're battling some things. Some things, they can't control. Some things they can. And, I think they've got a little bit more juice right now than they've had in some time, which, when you cover it, the last thing you want to do is cover a team that just has nothing to talk about. So it's nice to have a few storylines in recruiting for a change.
No doubt, man. No doubt. As you said, another nooner on Saturday, South Carolina, Tennessee. We've seen some interesting games between these two teams in the last, decade plus. What are your storylines to watch, man? Let's dive into the actual matchups. what are you going to be watching for on Saturday in Knoxville that's going to sort of maybe swing this game one way or the other, Austin?
Well, for me, it's, can Tennessee jump out early? Like they did a week ago, they jumped out early and Missouri was done at that point. When it was 28-3, it was, Missouri just caved. And I'm not saying South Carolina's going to cave because I don't think that's the case. But, I think if you can get out early and get to a point where, like, South Carolina's got to really start to score some points, I don't think South Carolina's got the offense that can play from behind, not significantly behind. And so I think the first quarter and a half, even the first half, is huge for both teams. Can South Carolina stay there, keep it right there, or even have the lead? And can Tennessee, get the lead and stretch it if they get it? So that's the biggest storyline for me. And then, does Tennessee fall into the same old traps of penalties and turning the football over? If they don't and they continue to play well, then I think Tennessee's got a good chance to win back-to-back games for the first time this season.
Last one I got for you, Austin. Tennessee favored in this game, according to Vegas. Also heavily favored. I don't know if you've seen this, the ESPN FPI. Last time I checked it, almost an 80% mark in terms of the FPI favoring them to win this game. So that may be, everyone's expectation or many people's expectation. But is the formula for South Carolina to win and pull an upset in this nooner on the road? Is it just that? Turnovers, penalties, having South Carolina actually consistently score some points, or is there another path to get there, you think?
No, I think that's the formula. And, to be honest with you, though, if South Carolina surprised me at all, outside of the top couple of teams in college football, there's more parity now than there ever has been. You just start looking at, and I know you can't compare scores, okay? But, when you really kind of just, though, look at how games have played out this year, like on any given Saturday, any of the middle of the road teams can beat any of the other middle of the road teams. And it's, or even like, 3 through 11 in the conference, 11 could beat 3 and it wouldn't surprise anybody. South Carolina can definitely win this football game, but I just think that they have to win it the way we talked about. I don't think they've not shown to this point the ability to score consistently enough to get into a shootout. I think that they've got to kind of get this thing in a low-scoring affair, and if that happens, that means they play good defense, and Tennessee's probably turned the ball over some and, had some self-inflicted wounds, and if that happens, then you get in the fourth quarter, and have the lead or be right there, anything can happen, and South Carolina can sure take advantage of it.
Austin, great stuff as always, man. Again, we appreciate it. If the South Carolina fans want to get a little more Tennessee perspective on Volquest.com, what are they going to be reading about over there right now?
Right now, Brent's got a great column up just on how Tennessee's kind of flipped the momentum of this season. We'll have our war room up tonight with all kinds of good recruiting nuggets. We have our Thursday podcast. That's our mailbag podcast where we take questions and, from the general's quarters. So, if you're a Tennessee / South Carolina fan, if there is such a thing, check it out.
Definitely, man. Austin, good stuff as always. Enjoy the game on Saturday, okay, man?
Will do. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin.
It's Austin Price, Volquest.com. Good stuff as always. Chris, anything that surprised you from that interview?
There was one, to be honest. The Jalen Hyatt thing, not playing as much, was a little bit surprising just because, admittedly, I had not tracked that as much. I had to go back and watch the Tennessee-Missouri game, and so I was kind of very quickly going through it, so obviously a lot of running plays and a lot of rushing yards in that game. When I turned on the game live over the weekend, last Saturday, I saw Hyatt in, I heard his name called, etc. So didn't realize he had not been playing as much. Javonte Payton, their other receiver he mentioned, I knew was having a pretty good year. But I was kind of surprised. The second point I'd make, kind of surprised to hear the positivity around the defense. Obviously they had a pretty good showing against Missouri. I think that was in large part because the game was over in, I don't know, the first quarter, if not the second quarter in that contest. They had some struggles against some other teams. Kenny Pickett, Pitt's quarterback, is really good. He's playing as well as anybody in the country. So surrendering some points to those guys, probably understandable. But it seems like, there was some positivity around this defense that despite the fact that they may have some limitations, they've done well in some areas that's, really helped their team. And there's kind of a parallel there with South Carolina's, team and their defense also, with the caveat that South Carolina, of course, has not been scoring at the same rate that Tennessee has or even close.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point from him, man, about Tennessee. Can they jump out on South Carolina early on? That's, to me, that's one of those keys. When he first said it, I was like, that's kind of a key to any game. Like if you jump out quick, yeah, that's a good thing for your team. But to his point, I think you look at Tennessee's offense; they have shown an ability to kind of pour on the points at times, and this is not. Also, to his point, this is not a South Carolina offense that has been able to sort of string together a bunch of points and sort of, you see some offense can have that sort of avalanche effect where, they score and sort of overwhelm a team. We have not seen that yet from South Carolina this year. So, I think hanging around, even if South Carolina's down, I think Beamer's group has showed they're not like a group that's going to quit. Missouri, and I kind of go back to the question: Did that last game tell us more about Tennessee, or did that tell us more about Missouri and their defense and the fact that I don't know? I don't want to say they laid down because I don't know, but when you give up that many points on your home turf to a team in the same conference, like this is not Charleston Southern trying to take an SEC team. This is two conference teams going up against each other. Is the talent differential for Tennessee's offense that different from Missouri's defense? You would think not. So, to me, which side did that tell us more about? I don't know. But just the fact that Tennessee showed they can take advantage of that, is a pretty good sign for their offense. So if South Carolina hangs around, generally we've seen not that it's necessarily a fair comparison, but we have seen in the past some of Heupel's offense. Speaking of Missouri, this is like the Missouri offense a few years ago with Drew Lock. Heupel was running that offense for a couple of years, and we've seen them put up huge numbers against defenses that weren't very good, and then when they play a pretty sound defense that doesn't beat itself, it's not quite as explosive. And now the other side of that, South Carolina's defense, you keep mentioning it, man. The fact they gave up some explosive runs, and then even some of those just 4, 5, 6 yard gains they gave up against Troy, now facing a Tennessee group that has obviously better dudes up front, better running back, and a quarterback run aspect. That to me is probably what scares you the most from a South Carolina perspective.
It definitely does. Tennessee's offensive line, putting together the star power piece that we run on Gamecock Central every week, is kind of a ranking of the past star comparisons of projected starters from each team. I kind of had forgotten about what Tennessee had on the offensive line. We knew last year, I think at one point under Jeremy Pruitt, they had 2 or 3 5-star guys starting on that offensive line. And they're still there actually with 2. With you got Cade Mays, you got Darnell Wright, you got Jerome Carvin in there. So there are some good players on that offensive line, the guys with talent that were highly recruited, and also some experience. Then the system can present you some problems. Obviously, you got the dual threat quarterback. To me, the number one thing, it isn't any of those, Wes. It is Tennessee's ability that they've shown to run the football. If you get bounced out of your gaps, if you give them open space, it can be trouble. And we saw a lot of that. So a lot for South Carolina to clean up, from the Troy game to this game. It's a big concern for sure.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about Hyatt, that being a surprise, man. Jalen Hyatt played, I got the PFF numbers up now. He played 20 snaps last week off the bench. Was a starter actually one game, I believe. He started the opener, played 70 plays against Bowling Green. And then the next week, I don't know if he was banged up or if this was coach's decision, 5 snaps the next week, 16 snaps the week after. He actually played 48 snaps against Florida and then played 20 snaps last week in relief against Missouri. So I'm with you that I sort of, as I was asking the question, I was kind of thinking in my mind, am I about to look dumb because he's been banged up or something? That because I haven't heard him brought up as much this week, but that is surprising as much as he sort of started to emerge last year. Obviously still a very, very talented kid and someone that, let's be honest, South Carolina could use on their roster. We'll see, guys. I don't know. I don't think, the more we talk, Chris, I don't think it's a very favorable matchup for South Carolina from like a literal like matchup standpoint. Tennessee's strengths, South Carolina's weaknesses, Tennessee's weaknesses, South Carolina's strengths. I don't think it's a great matchup, but we'll see. I also, something I did learn, I didn't realize Hooker had turned the football over and had been a little bit more injury prone prior to these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's true. And look, that's to me kind of the key for this game. And again, you can't be, I think we've gone into every single week saying this. South Carolina's done well in the turnover department in terms of margin and just straight up just forcing turnovers defensively, but you don't want to be relying on that. And I think had we not seen more turnovers against Troy, which ended up being a win, if we had not seen that level of turnovers against Kentucky, which ended up being a close loss, that Kentucky game could have gotten certainly a higher margin of victory for the Wildcats. And I think the Troy game would have been even more dangerous than it ended up being, but that said, that is a key. This defense has hung its hat on getting turnovers, tightening up in the red zone some, those types of things. Those are going to be key because it's going to be hard to consistently just go out there and say, okay, you're going to limit this Vols offense to 14 points, 17 points. That's going to be tough because with what they've done, with what they're capable of doing, and what we've seen from South Carolina, that's an important point, the matchups here. What South Carolina has struggled with is honestly some of the stuff that Tennessee excels at. And so you kind of throw out a little bit of, well, Georgia is much more talented, or is Kentucky really that much better than Tennessee offensively, or vice versa? No, really what it's about is the matchups. And this one is not as favorable for the Gamecock defense, which is why I think, yeah, they got to clean some stuff up. But I think to stay in this game, they're going to have to score on offense, but they're also going to need to force a couple turnovers, which the Vols have done better in that department the past couple weeks.
So Tennessee so far this year, Chris, 38 points scored against Bowling Green, 34 against Pitt, 56 versus Tennessee Tech, 14 in a 38-14 loss to Florida, and then, of course, 62 last week. I'm going to put you on the spot, which I love to do, by the way.
Nice.
How many points does South Carolina need to score Saturday afternoon? Not a, and I'm not even talking about like if they score 50 points, they win the game. I'm talking if let's say you just had a crystal ball and you were able to see the exact number. Mm-hmm. How high would it have to be for you to feel like within a reasonable, percentage that South Carolina probably wins the game? How many points do they need to score to win this game?
That is an on-the-spot question. Probably.
I'll give you a second to think about it because we've actually already got some folks weighing in. Jonathan, who has been a pretty respectful Tennessee fan that's hopped on, he says 30 or more. Travis says 27. Fred says 35. Craig says 28 to 31. Mark says 28. Chris, was there a number that just popped into your brain when I asked that?
Yeah, kind of. For me, it was that 31 number, which can they get there, right? I mean, and I think some of it has to do with game flow. Like South Carolina could score less and win the game depending on the game flow, but I think what you're banking on is that in some ways Tennessee gets theirs. And if South Carolina scores 31 points, that they do it in a fashion in which Tennessee's possessions are kind of limited. What I mean by that is they don't score – South Carolina doesn't score 4 touchdowns on explosive plays, right? Because then maybe you're in a shootout. what you would want on that lower end, and I know some people are going 31 points for South Carolina would feel like an absolute explosion right now, and it would. But if you're getting those 31 points by sustaining some drives, keeping your defense off the field against this Vols offensive attack, that would be kind of the ideal scenario. Are there ways that they can win the game scoring less? Yeah. But I think getting to that number and doing it in a fashion where you're staying on the field and sustaining drives, that's the most likely thing. Now, I think what we have to do is step back and say, can they do that? Because we haven't seen it this season, really.
Well, we have not seen 30 points scored by South Carolina against SEC opponents. And I don't include Vandy in the SEC. So there's my Vandy burn for the day. But in all seriousness, South Carolina scored 41 against Vandy last year. I think just blew them out. Kevin Harris rushed for like 300 yards or something insane. But seriously, against normal SEC opponents, what did they score? 28 against Auburn last year in that win. I mean, it has not happened very much.
Yeah, I mean, it
needs to happen. It needs to happen. Ole Miss, yes, at Ole Miss, Travis.
Yeah, I was going to say, now that defense also didn't count. That was like, I mean, seriously, I mean, they
against like an average SEC defense.
Yeah,
basically.
even average.
30. Okay, so and what was the Auburn game? 30-22. I think that's right. It was an 8-point win. I remember that. So y'all get the point though, as far as like just an offense act for South Carolina. Actually, the offense itself scoring that has been tough to come by in recent years. Not that any of that is on this current staff, prior to the last 5 games, obviously. But let's say it like that. If South Carolina's offense, so we're even taking away defensive scores, special team scores. If South Carolina's offense scores 31 points in the game Saturday, you feel relatively good.
Yeah, I would feel relatively good. Now Tennessee's capable of scoring more than that defensively. Like I said, I'll go back to what I said earlier. It kind of depends on how you're getting the points. Some people may think that that's silly, right? But if you have 31 points, it's 4 touchdowns and a field goal. If you have 3 lengthy touchdown drives and you're cutting the game down and you're limiting Tennessee's opportunities to get back on the field, South Carolina doesn't want to get in a shootout in any form or fashion. They'll lose a shootout. That's the thing I'm most confident in. Everything about this game, all the different storylines, the thing I'm most confident in is that South Carolina can't get in a shootout with Tennessee because they're not going to win that. They don't have the offensive firepower. So I think it depends on how they're getting the points. Get to 31 points. And yeah, I'd feel reasonably good about that because if you've done that, odds are you've gotten some stops, right? Odds are South Carolina's not going to score 31 points on 5 possessions. They're going to need possessions to get there. So I think it's safe to assume that if they could reach a mark like that, I'm not saying that's likely, y'all. I'm saying that's what, a number that I'd feel comfortable saying they could pick up a win with. Then they've had several possessions above the 5 that it takes to get to 31 points.
So Johnny K.O. Rambo says, not sure if this has been asked, who shows up, the Tennessee who lost at home to Pitt or the Tennessee that manhandled Missouri? And I honestly, I didn't watch how that game played out, for Tennessee. Obviously, they gave up some points in the game, but they put up some points on offense as well. And that to me, I think it just goes back to that. Tennessee could be just good enough offensively in the running game that it just simply makes it very hard for South Carolina to keep up. And that to me would be the biggest worry from a South Carolina perspective. Tennessee can make some mistakes defensively, but if they go score 35 points or so, it's just going to be really, really hard for South Carolina to win this football game. There's a question earlier I did want to hit, and then we're going to get out of here. Let me go find it. This will be while I look for it, Chris, you want to tell everybody real quick about Dead Soxy?
Yeah, so we're partnered again, GC Live with Dead Soxy. Fine folks over there. have, of course, as you've heard on the show, as you've heard on GC Live so many times, patented no slip technology, buttery soft feel, men's and women's, dress, athletics, all kinds of socks, colors, shapes, sizes, and the college line that you see if you're on YouTube up in the top left with the spur line of socks. You can get 25% off your order, your total order, using the promo code COCKY, COCKY, at deadsoxy.com. That's DEADSOXY.com. So when the show's over, go check out those guys at Dead Soxy.
Yeah, let's go out. Justin Simmons on our Primal Gourmet chat line here wants to know who decides that. And Justin asked that when we were talking about Jalen Hyatt earlier not playing as much. I think Justin, great question, by the way. It's kind of a combination of those things, but generally it's kind of like a hierarchy, I think. Like the receivers coach is going to kind of be making those decisions, but he can obviously be overruled by the coordinator, and the coordinator can be overruled by the head coach. So it's kind of I mean, don't you think, Chris, that from like a day-to-day, like especially drive to drive, there's a lot of power for the position coach to be like, these are the guys I want to play. These are the guys I'm most comfortable with playing. These are the guys, because they're working with them in practice. They're seeing everything they do as opposed to part of what they do in practice. They're meeting with them. They're seeing who's looking up at the board the whole time and who's dozing off in the back. So I think it starts with the position coach. Now, if the head coach is like, hey, I want more of this guy, we need this guy on the field more, then the position coach better make it happen. He better, or then he's going to be, in some trouble. So that's how I would describe it, Chris.
Yeah, and obviously the position coach is going to spend the most time with the guys, and it even can go down to the strength staff. I mean, from what you saw in the summer, there's going to be conversations on all that stuff, and the staff, they have meetings every week, and I'm talking about just in general terms at every school. So the position coach and thus the coordinator and the head coach are going to kind of know who's trustworthy, who has the best practice habits, who can do these particular things well. And you go from there. And generally, guys are going to be on the same page with that. The head coach or the coordinator is usually not going to really, really push to play a guy who has bad practice habits, hasn't been producing in games, hasn't been producing in practice.
Erlen with a good question here. Some folks were talking earlier about Kevion Mullins, and Erlen mentioning that Trayvon Kenyon has sort of passed him. I would say to that, Erlen, that you just got to kind of look at those tight end spots as being two different tight end spots. I mean, you're right. Kevion Mullins has not seen the field as much as maybe we would have thought this year, but Kenyon is more in there when they're looking for an additional blocker at tight end. We saw them sort of go heavy at times on Saturday, and especially it actually seemed like they went heavy and then maybe almost used that as a decoy, Chris. I thought they went heavy with multiple tight ends and then went play action off of that, which actually was very successful. So yeah, that's what that is. It's not necessarily always that a guy passes another guy because they play the same broad, position. There are multiple different skill sets within tight end, within the tight end room and within sort of that global position. Speaking of, man, did you notice? I don't think we hit on this yesterday. Did you notice when Satterfield yesterday talked about the offense and under center versus pistol versus shotgun, and how he normally would have liked under center a bit more because it lets his backs get downfield, like if or downhill, I should say. Like if he's trying to implement power running game, he wants downhill stuff like that, they would go under center. He doesn't necessarily like shotgun as much because of it's hard to get the angles he's looking for. Well, they've shied away from that a little bit because of Doty's foot. And I think I took that to mean just logistically, like the traffic in there. They don't want him to get stepped on again with the footwork required and you being up under center close to the offensive lineman. The pistol look, which we saw South Carolina use a bit of, maybe gives them the best of both worlds in that. And
Yeah.
Satterfield kind of alluded to that. And Chris, when I look at two things, the fact South Carolina's a lot of their success in the running game has been on kind of that outside zone stretch play, and some of their best pass plays have been on either pure just play action or on the boot action where you have like those levels routes to the outside with somebody flashing underneath in the flat and then kind of an over route over top of that. We've been talking about identity for 5 weeks now. I wonder if we saw a little flash, as well as Luke Doty throws on the run, a little flash of what could be becoming this offense's identity. I don't want to say that's it yet because it may be a completely different look, completely different feel on Saturday. But it just seemed like both of those things were pretty successful on Saturday, and both those things actually pair together very, very well.
Yeah, and to your point, to go back to what Satterfield said about the shotgun, to expand on that just a little bit, he said, "Look, it's hard to expect a guy like take a zone read play, right? It's hard to expect a guy to be full speed when he's not even sure if he's getting the ball. You have the mesh point of the zone read. He's got the ball. Okay, here we go. Now, the zone read play can be very successful, right? And I think they could have more success running it the more that Luke Doty is able to keep it, or he's just establishes himself as more of a running threat. That could happen this season. Luke talked about it the other day. Satterfield, kind of alluded to it a bit. Certainly, he looked comfortable. Luke did running those boots. That we saw more of that against Troy than we'd seen. We saw some other different concepts in this offense. For example, we saw kind of a little variation of a kind of pin and pull where instead of pulling two offensive linemen, Nick Jones pointed this out to me, former Gamecock wide receiver. He thought that it was maybe even an in-game adjustment or just something they went to more because their linemen weren't getting around quick enough. They pulled a lineman and then they used Jaheim Bell as a puller because obviously he's quicker. Got those two guys out there later in the game when Kevin Harris was having more success with that. So maybe so. I mean, in some ways, Wes, and nobody wants to hear this, they've kind of had to feel their way through these first few games, right? Because you go into it, you lose your quarterback. Now you're adjusting to having Zeb Nolan out there and some different things. The offensive line and maybe some of your concepts are not working how you thought they would for various reasons, right? And maybe some things are even better than you thought, like Josh Vann early in the season produced probably even more than they thought. And so you have to feel your way through it. And that process kind of includes reincorporating Luke Doty's legs more in this offense. And so I think that's a huge key to where if they can keep, going more and more towards him being established as a runner, that's going to potentially open up some other things. But that pistol is part of it because it still allows guys, to be able to come downhill while, running some of the schemes that they want to run.
And I think that there was a play that Luke took off. I think it was design roll to the right going into the student section end zone. It wasn't there, and he just took off running after he realized nobody was open, and he got, I think, 8 yards. He was a couple of yards short. But to me, that was one of the first times this year since Luke has been back that I saw him make the decision, put his foot in the ground, and go try to get the first down. And I thought that was a sign. Have there been some bad moments that still, I think, concern you moving forward on offense? No question. Again, we try to have nuance on this show. I'm not saying that it's going to just be fixed by any means, but I feel like the offense's just overall potential is going to, just like that, we're going to be like, whoa, Luke's back, very close to 100% as far as the running ability. And it's going to open up a lot of other things. Will that be this week? Will that be week 8? Will that be week 12? Who knows? But I think when we see it, we're going to be like, oh, okay. Like it's gonna be apparent when it happens. And dude, so to your point with the zone read and that stuff, talking to a buddy of mine who actually is a former SEC offensive lineman, and ran into him the other day, and he says, hey man, what's going on with the offensive line? And I said, why are you asking me? I want to know to you what is going on with the offensive line. And he said, he's like, man, you may not think about it like this, but a lot of people have talked about the complexity of the offense and, just busted assignments and stuff like that. As far as examples of miscommunications and stuff like that. He's like, it actually probably goes a little bit even deeper than that. If you're not quite comfortable and you're hesitant in what you're doing, it's hard to just be forceful and violent and to fly off the football as an offensive lineman. If there's that little bit of hesitation about, am I about to mess up? Am I about to do this wrong? So he said he noticed from the very beginning, even, against Eastern Illinois, that the guys just looked a little bit hesitant compared to what they were last year coming off the football. And I think a lot of that does go back to that there is more and there's more involved in this scheme. There's more different looks. There's more things the line has to do in this scheme than a more simplified Bobo scheme. So is that something, again, we've talked about simplifying. Is that something that is just sort of works its way out and at some point it clicks? Even not to compare it to Steve Spurrier, Chris, the Spurrier offenses, when he was here at South Carolina early on and he was running the old school Spurrier offense, I remember those offenses really struggling at times. And then it was like at the end, do you remember the end of the 2006 with Blake Mitchell? That offense wasn't doing anything towards the beginning of the year. And then it clicked and everybody just started sort of being comfortable and knowing where they were supposed to be. And they were going up and down the field on everybody. So not that you should expect that, but sometimes when the comfort level clicks, it's like a slow grind, a slow grind, a slow grind, and then it's just like boom, it clicks, and nobody really knows why it took that long or exactly what it is. But we'll see, man. Also, you mentioned filling out. I feel like they've kind of been filling out the perfect way to use EJ Jenkins as well, and I think that is such a unique skill set. You don't see guys with that skill set, man. Such a unique skill set. It seems like they maybe have found how to use him.
Who was that kid that this just popped in my head that Arkansas had? That was 6'7" or so. Was it Mark?
Monk?
Yeah, I think his name was Marcus Monk. That's what I want to say. And I'll have to go back. I don't want to say I'm even making that comparison, but I recall they used him in some interesting ways, situations. Big kid. But yeah, EJ Jenkins, I mean, has obviously become more and more comfortable. He had to miss some time, and then just kind of feeling his way into the role. Has started practicing better, as Beamer and Satterfield both noticed, and it's paid off. I mean, 23 snaps back on Saturday, first career touchdown, had a couple catches, and looked good doing it. And so, to have him out there everybody's going to talk about him as a red zone weapon, rightfully so. But also just have him as a big target, over the middle is something that South Carolina could certainly use, because any playmaker right now is something that they need to kind of take the pressure off of that front, and maybe we've talked a lot about opening up the passing game, having Luke Doty become more and more comfortable as a runner. Those things could help, right, to unlock some of the other things that this offense has struggled with.
I think, Chris, the guy he reminds me of is actually Kelvin Benjamin. And Kelvin Benjamin, actually not – now, Kelvin Benjamin is a tall dude. He's legit 6'5", a little bit shorter even than EJ. But this guy was playing essentially receiver at a true 6'5", not a 6'3 and a half 6'5", which some of the guys are, a true 6'5", 245 pounds. So when I saw EJ in person for the first time, I was like, who does this remind me of? And I could not place it. And then, obviously Chris and I are both Panthers fans. It clicked, and I was like, Kelvin Benjamin, that's who he reminds me of. So we'll see if he can keep build off of what's happening. Our man Mark here, Mark's been calling for some EJ at receiver actually for a few weeks now, man. So shout to Mark. He nailed it. We'll see if EJ can build off of it and kind of go from there, man. But good for him. Seems like a good kid. Good grief, man. I walked by him. I think I said yesterday, this is a tall human being.
He is very tall. He's very tall. I don't really have anything else to add. I can confirm. Extremely tall, especially standing next to us, Wes. Woo.
Yes. I mean, are you with me on my Kelvin Benjamin comparison or not?
No, I could kind of see it. You know, it's a little bit hard, and I know you're not comparing, you know, the production level and everything. Kelvin Benjamin was just he was something else, you know, as far in college and even
in college.
in college. Well, and he had some flashes in the NFL, mainly because he played for the Panthers. It automatically makes you a much better player when you play for the Panthers. No, or worse, probably. But I could see it. I just looked up Marcus Monk too, and I now like my EJ comparison for this reason. I looked up 2 measurements because I couldn't remember exactly how tall he was. I just remembered being like, wow, that guy's tall. One said 6'4" and one said 6'7". That sounds a lot like the preseason arguments about EJ Jenkins. Where did our man go? Who was the guy that made the bet with us? That was a while back now.
What is his name? Greg?
It was Greg. He has disappeared from the show.
Yeah, rather than pay his bet, Greg changed his name.
That's dedication.
That's probably the guy who's hitting the dislike button before the show starts.
Greg was so adamant that he wasn't going to pay his 27 cents a day, which is, by the way, what it costs to join Gamecock Central. 27 cents a day, that he was just, I'm out. I'm not going to get any more Gamecocks content. I can't do it. And Justin said he went into witness protection.
Yeah, disappeared right off the face of the planet.
Man. And I hope he's not mad at us because we gave him some flack, but we were just joking. It was out of love.
Yeah, but I mean, he still owes us, so that part's not.
He swore EJ was 6'4".
My man is not 6'4".
Maybe we can have Marcus Monk on the show.
He's an agent in Arkansas now, by the way. I just learned that.
Okay. I mean, come on and talk about his clients and
talk about how tall he is.
And we could show him some clips of EJ Jenkins and see if he thinks there's a comparison and just settle this once and for all. All right.
No doubt. Let's do it. Marcus, if you're listening, let's do it, man. All right. That's it. That's the end of the show. When we start rambling, that means we need to get off here. He's Chris. I'm Wes. Appreciate the support. As always, hey, tomorrow I'll be live from Market on Main, 1 p.m. 1 p.m. kickoff on Friday, live from Market on Main. Appreciate y'all. Have a good one.